Thank you for checking out the Media Marketing Podcast, a place where you can learn all things media and marketing related. Don't miss a beat in boosting your business and your brand. In each episode, you'll gain valuable insights, tools, and strategies to apply to your marketing efforts. And now your host, Brian Cargill.
Okay, I'm joined today by Chris West, who is the owner and founder of Video Narrative, a production company that specializes in growing speaking businesses through brand clarity, speaker demo reels, and a website design. The origin of Chris's narrative work came in neurobiology class, where he first learned the power of story for organizing information in the mind. Completing this research one May afternoon, he resolved never to create another video without telling an authentic story, a commitment that led to years of research on the way we connect, learn, and grow through stories. Today, Chris works alongside thought leaders to increase their message, clarity, and impact through powerful narratives. When not creating videos, Chris is out backpacking with his wife and 2 children and serving as a mentor with the nonprofit Holla. Hopefully I said that right. Thanks for joining me, Chris.
Yeah, so glad to be with you, Brian.
Yeah, this is awesome. And we met at the National Speakers Association, earlier this year. And I was just, it's always great to meet another videographer, someone that has appreciation for story and helping people in the community.
Yeah, well, and like any videographer, I mean, it doesn't matter what service you're in, right? I think we all are either helping people grow their businesses or not. So, video is certainly a component of it, but it's, at the end of the day, I think it's all about growing businesses.
Definitely. And I love in your bio, I didn't even know this about you, but it started in neurobiology class. I don't know a lot of people can say that they've learned or found storytelling in that. So do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, it's a really important story. I think it's worth, absolutely sharing. And that is that, so it actually happened for me. Yeah, like I shared in one May morning, I had been doing a research paper for a neurobiology class in graduate school, and I had reached a point where I had been typing for so long that I needed to go somewhere else. So I just started driving around, and I went to a completely new part of town, went to a coffee shop I'd never been to before. And I was reading this one book, and this sentence stopped everything. And it really did change my life, because the sentence as I saw it made me shift how I thought about any time I'm presenting or sharing any type of information to someone. And on the page, what was written was, we're not quite sure why. We can't exactly describe the process, but, and this is what was written, the only time all the brain systems come online and integrate is when the mind is hearing a story. And that's so, so important, because it's amazing to me how many people are tasked to give presentations to their team, in a sales conversation, anywhere, on anything, and they don't tell a story. They give information, they give facts, etc. But the only time that all of the brain systems come online and integrate is when they're hearing a story. And I think that's so powerful, because I realized at that moment, I stopped everything and I thought, I'm never going to share an idea. I'm never going to speak in front of a group of people. I'm never going to do any type of conveying information to people without telling a story. And I never have. And even my bio, as you just read, I didn't just describe myself. I told one story in it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, kind of, what do you think that originates from? Like, just people sitting around the campfire, cavemen just telling stories, and that's just what's been ingrained in us. I mean, yeah, stories are what protect us from bad things. It's what inspire us to do good things, right?
Yeah, well, they have actually even identified a chromosome that, when you have experiences, make sense of them, turns them into basically long-term understanding of it. And that there's actually like something they've identified, sorry, not a chromosome, a gene. They've identified a gene that does basically, and they call it the storytelling gene, to make sense of our world, turns things into a story that our brain can understand. So we contextualize everything we do by telling ourselves about that experience. And if you want to really convey anything powerful that makes people remember it, it's got to be wrapped up in a story.
Man, yeah, so wild. And you hear, I've been to a lot of presentations and speeches where people don't use a single story, and yeah, it does kind of fall flat. And then when I think back on some of the best speeches, some of the best TED Talks I've ever heard out there, they usually had one story that they wove throughout, or maybe three little ones that kind of each resonated to drive their point home.
Yeah. And I think in the end, and this is just for anyone who's listening, who is a business owner of any kind, or does sales, or is an independent owner, it's telling the story in the right order. So when you tell a story, what you have to do is you essentially have to tell first the hook or the place that the person is in, and then give the backstory of how you've been there yourself. That's the part, is I think so often people start too quickly by telling their story when they don't have a strong enough hook. And again, it's just like, think about some of the best movies you've seen. And I think the most masterful film that's ever done this was for anyone who saw Mission Impossible 3, which was the first Mission Impossible that J.J. Abrams directed. And the whole film starts out with him in a chair, and his wife, or the person he loves, is about to be electrocuted or shot. And they're asking him about these things. And you are so gripped from the moment it starts for what Tom Cruise is going through that you cannot look away, and it just sets you up for the rest of the film. Then it goes back. And I think that's the key, is that up front, we have to ask a question that makes them go, oh my gosh, that's what I'm asking right now. Like, for example, when we're recording this, a lot of people are going through a crazy amount of pressure through COVID-19. So the question most people are asking is, how can we keep the same level of performance, or how can we hit the same level of income when our resources have fundamentally changed? If you ask that question first, now you've got the character thinking in their own terms about their own story, and then you share your own story. That's the great way to tell great stories and compel people to action through a narrative.
Yeah, that's awesome. Something kind of, relatable, and kind of catering it towards who the audience is at the time. And I love that Mission Impossible hook right there. Because right away you have so many questions, and then you hope that throughout the narrative that J.J. Abrams is able to, unravel some of those various details.
Yeah,
man. Yeah, that's great. Any other favorite stories that come to mind for you?
I think we've got all of them. I'll just say this, is that it's one thing to talk about story, but it's just another thing to ask whether or not people are doing it. For example, most people do in some way or another, hear sermons on Sundays if they attend a church or something. And it's amazing to me. So I work with professional speakers. I see about 100 keynotes a year, and I watch audience participation. I watch how much they're moving. I watch the room. I watch the energy. And I especially, like, it's a default to my day job, but anytime someone's giving any type of presentation or a sermon or anything like that, I just watch the audience, and people talk about information, and then they stop, and they don't even realize they're doing it, but they start sharing a story. Everyone in the room stops moving. Everything gets much more still. People get way more engaged. And I just feel like most business owners, most leaders, most people just don't tell great stories.
Yeah. And then, cause I think for, even as I've been like, thinking about myself and like my own narrative, my own business, and the things that people like kind of get drawn into, has your story, or like the story that you think of for somebody, does it change over time? Does it have fluidity, or is it really just kind of one single note that you can draw everything back to? Does that kind of make sense? Like, do you have multiple stories, or is there one story that should just be talked about, that you reiterate for every audience?
Yeah. Well, so I think anyone building a business should come up with their one brand story, and that doesn't change. It can grow, it can mature, or maybe you change your brand story, but at any given time, you only have one. And more often than not, most businesses have not actually come up with a brand story. They've come up with a logo. They've come up with their services. They've come up with a business plan for what they want to do, but they actually haven't written a brand story, which is, who do we serve? What are their struggles? Where are they today? How does our story, or my story, my background fit into that? What's the process that we help them go through? What are the ways that they can see themselves different in the end of this? It's just taking time to do that, and then being really clear about the way that they share that with others. Right. And there's actually a process. Do you want to hear the process?
Let's hear it. Yeah. Cause that's going to be like one of the follow-up questions is, why do people not do this? And maybe cause it's hard. If you've ever done it before, it's really challenging. And then, maybe people it's just a blind spot. People don't see it as a necessary thing.
Yeah, it is a blind spot, but it's something that can be overcome with these exact 5 sentences. And for anyone listening, they can just write them down, but it can be overcome with this: as I work with, what I consistently see, what most people don't realize is once they, and the results are. So let me share that with you. So if someone were to ask me, oh, Chris, you're at a convention, or you're at a marketing group, or you're at some type of networking or something of any kind, like, just stand up for a minute, tell us what you do, right? That's a very funny question to be asked for most people, because they know what they know they do. But when they're asked to describe it to people, that's when it gets difficult, right? So if you're ever in a situation, you can actually use that line. So what I would say is, for example, I work with professional speakers. So if someone were to ask me what I do, I say, as I work with professional speakers throughout the country, what I consistently see is that it is very, as I work with professional speakers throughout the country, it's very difficult to take what you do in person, what you're great at, and turn it into the way it looks online. And what most people don't realize is they get 3 things right. First, their distinction, what makes them unique. Second, their brand story, the story about who they are. And third, the way in which they present that story in their marketing, everything changes. Mm-hmm. Once people go through that process, the results are astounding. I've seen people just change their distinction, their brand story, and then the way they market with that brand story, and grow their business by 80% in a single year. And I've seen that happen over and over. So what I just did is I told a story without it sounding like I told a story. I said, what, as I work with, and then what I consistently see, that's the problem. That's the struggle that you see over and over. What most people don't realize, and I said that it's really these 3 things. And then if they get these 3 things right, the results will be astounding. You can use that framework to write your brand story, and it's extremely effective to then take that and translate it into a website.
Yeah, that's super powerful. And then, yeah, kind of distilling it down to those, well, five sentences you kind of said. And then, that's kind of, you live that out through all of your messaging, right? Like, so on your LinkedIn bio, so reflect that, your website reflects that, even your email signature, your business card would all reflect that statement, right?
In one way or another, just in different forms of it. Yeah. Mm. You build that distinction, and then when you talk about it, you've got a story with it.
That's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that, Chris. I think a lot of people are going to find that helpful, just because, where do you start? And I think, a lot of us think all the things that we learned in school, maybe like an intro, body, and conclusion. But I think just distilling it to those 5 can help you hone in. And and that's applicable beyond just speakers, whether you're a freelancer or realtor, salesperson. Knowing those 5, that core distinction is huge. A big thank you to our sponsors over at songtub.com. That's right, song or music and a tub, like a bath, but more fun to say. Tub. Anyway, you can check out Songtub's website for any of your music needs. In fact, the song playing in the background right now is from Songtub. So why pick them over anyone else? Well, they curate the music. And I know the guys, so that means I know that they're selecting great music for your project. A lot of other companies will brag about how many songs they have, maybe 100,000, 200,000, maybe even 1 million. But honestly, I don't have time for that. I don't have the time to just sit down and go next, a song not so great, trying to figure out where the best music is. Songtub.com, great place to get your music. And now I'm excited to offer you the first month for free if you go to songtub.com/pro, P-R-O, and we have a promo code for you. Yes, that's right, my name, your host, Brian, B-R-Y-A-N, and that will give you your first month free to have access to a huge music library that you can use towards your next video project, podcast, or any of your general audio needs. Anyway, back to the show. I was going to ask you, so that's very helpful that we have kind of the foundation for people, but maybe you can talk about kind of how digitally you've seen your clients change over the years, or how you've seen the digital space change. Because storytelling is always storytelling, but how people do that, I'm sure has changed over the last decade at least.
Yeah, well, the biggest change, and it's been for a great reason, has been that most people used to see their website essentially the way that you would see formerly a like a handout about your business. So they basically thought, well, this is this is something where someone will come to learn about my business. So I'll write all about my business. And you still see this a lot. You know, if you work as an independent contractor, if you're a creative, a designer, etc., you've got a website and it talks about you. I do this, these are my services. And one of the other things is that everyone always puts their services up top. You know, like I do this, 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 and this. So when would you ever come up to a person and they say hi, and you say hi, and then you say, what's your name? And they said, I'm Brian. And then you say, what's your name? It's Chris. Cool. Tell me about what you do. Right? When would you ever just like throw one, your services, or two, your like card onto that person the second you meet them? But I feel like that's what we do with our website. So I would say the biggest difference has been that people have begun to realize that they have to learn and meet their clients where they are, and start with the first two sections of their website after their header or their hero image being and describing where their clients are and why they might be a perfect fit for them. So again, telling their client story, and only then moving to their personal story or their company story. And then from there, the actual process in which the client or the company can serve and the results that people can experience. We've shifted, and especially our company designs websites, we always offer this incredible hope or this something that your promise statement up front. But then after that, the next two sections are all about your clients and where they are. And when someone reads that, they're not just reading about your website or your company, they're actually reading about themselves. They're much more inclined to step into that process with you and trust you.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I like how you talked about they're seeing themselves in there. So I think kind of, one of the bigger revelations I've learned in the last couple years here is that the client is really the hero. And I think a lot of times we see the company as being the hero of the story, but we're really there helping guide them along the way. So I think that's great. Kind of like when the client is reading their website, they should be able to see themselves in the copy, right? Or in the video or whatever, materials that you're sharing.
Absolutely. And I think Donald Miller has been the biggest catalyst in changing all of this, who is the, owner of Story Branding, who wrote How to Build a Story Brand. I think that's become a viral enough information that for any of us, like, for example, I studied narrative therapy, who were telling stories, it created a very tangible, tactical framework that most people could dive into. Mm-hmm. And it's really changing the way that most people are thinking about their business, and for the good, which is great.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, and this is kind of an aside, but talking about narrative therapy, can you talk about that? I'm sure I'm interested. I think other people might be slightly interested too.
Well, yeah, narrative therapy is a fascinating modality of counseling, and it's something that I do on myself all the time, although I'm not a practicing counselor, is that if you think about yourself as a character in a story, you tend to make better decisions. So say you're working with a 17-year-old kid and they're acting out, and you ask them about maybe a favorite movie or something that they like, and then you start talking about characters and why did the character make that decision, and then you kind of surreptitiously go back to ways that they're making decisions. And if they were a character in a story, what do you think that character would be wanting right now? And what do you think they're trying to get out of it? And it's amazing when someone takes time to basically step outside of their own story and see themselves as a character, they tend to live a better life, which is living a better story. And so narrative therapy is a really structured way to use story to help people make great decisions and live great stories in their lives, as well as deal with really challenging situations they've gone through in the past and make sense of them. Like, that contextualization we talked about, help understand why that they might have gone through that, or what greatness could come as a result of something that was, quite traumatic and harmful to them. So what's interesting is that I do it on myself all the time. When I face a challenge, I always think, the best stories in the world are overcoming great challenges. So I must be living in a great challenge. And I'm not joking. I have programmed my mind to, whenever I'm facing a challenge, think I must be in a great story. Now that's so different than like everything sucks and things are going bad to, I'm facing this, I must be in a great story. And if I make great decisions, I'm going to have a great story out of this. So that's essentially the narrative therapy process. And it's something that I basically do on myself all the time.
Yeah, I love that mindset. And I think that for a lot of the business owners that are listening to that, yeah, it can be tough. Yeah, even especially like with what's going on right now, there's a big pandemic, and, overcoming and rising to the occasion, and trying to be resilient. And I like that concept of, yeah, when times get hard, think about all the great movies out there. They usually have some kind of big challenge, or else it wouldn't be a movie. If the guy just, showed up to work, won the lottery and got to sit on the couch for the rest of, his days, that wouldn't really make for such a good movie. But
we want that out of life, and it doesn't make for a very good life either.
No, yeah, you kind of need to that challenge, things that are stretching you all the time, right? Outside your comfort zone.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting time in the world, and it's stretching people, and instead of being resistant to it, and it's a great analogy to think about things like a rubber band. A big rubber band, if you actually stretch it a lot, it actually gets more and more stretchy, right? But if you stretch it too far, it'll snap. So there's this place of knowing your limits, but at the same time knowing that you're going to actually be able to do more, expand more, if you see whichever challenge you're going through as this awesome opportunity.
Yeah, you kind of. Yeah, I think the rubber band, I think of muscles all the time. Muscles are pretty much a rubber band, and you're trying to strengthen that all the time. And so you're getting, just building that emotional muscle, I guess, to be able to handle, tougher situations. This is pretty awesome, Chris. You've been able to kind of, I think, traditionally people think of like storytelling as like kind of that creative brain all over here, but then you've been able to take like the scientific side of things, neurobiology, and like fuse those together. So would you say that there's kind of a science to storytelling?
There is, but at the same time, going down that road is what most people want to do. I recently read a book that was all about storytelling, and yet the person just described storytelling the whole time. What would be far more effective is if he had told us a story about how he learned about storytelling. That would have got me going. So one of the things that I will say is that, for example, as an author, Donald Miller, his first book he wrote was more like in high school or college. It didn't do very well. It was a good book, but his essentially first book as an author, as a professional author, went to the New York Times bestselling list. And it went there because it was a great story. And I just remind people all the time, it's like, when do you want to read a whole book from start to finish, that is just about a subject where you're getting details about something, right? What if you took the same details and you wrapped it in one story, or you wrapped it in a set of stories? Then the mind can make sense of it, remember it, and always share it with others or utilize it in a time of need. Mm-hmm. So there is a science to storytelling, but I just think that the easier way to think about it is just this. First, figure out what you're trying to tell people, and then ask yourself, what story could I tell with this? Wrap whatever your message is in a story, and you will be far more effective. For example, when I do sales calls, I happen to love sales because I don't consider myself trying to sell anything to anyone. I just try to consider myself, one, getting to know someone, two, trying to understand what they're doing in their life or in their business, and then three, seeing if whatever the gap is between where they are now and what they're trying to achieve, I can help them. If I can help them, they'll feel it, they'll know it. And if we're clear about what that is, that gap, and how to overcome it, doesn't matter what the price is necessarily, as long as they can see that it's going to be worth the investment. In that process of helping them see that they might be able to attain the vision that they have in mind, all I ever do is tell a story of someone who was in a similar spot that we've worked with in the past.
That's awesome. Yeah, then they can put themselves in that shoes. Yeah.
Totally. So there is a science to it, but like, I think that it's just simply figure out what you want to convey, and then decide or ask yourself, what story could I tell about this? And your brain will come with an answer.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I like your approach to sales. I think if every salesperson was like that, I think we would have a lot better taste in our mouths, or outlook on salespeople in general, if they were just looking to see, hey, how can I help this person? And, really trying to be empathetic, put yourself in their shoes, and try to just, be a good person, I think, at the end of the day. Right.
Absolutely.
And when you talk about storytelling, it makes me kind of think of like, what are some of the biggest, stories of our, of all time. And that's like, the Bible, or you think of the book, Think and Grow Rich. That's just encapsulated lots of different stories. So yeah, a lot of those books that make it to the New York Times bestsellers, I think that's kind of, we hit it on the head there with having a key story.
Yeah, like for example, Think and Grow Rich, the whole book starts out with him essentially telling the story of what's his name, Carnegie, taking him aside and telling him there's this secret. And I'm going to tell it to you. I'm not going to say it to you directly, but you can hear it in what I'm about to share. Then he shares it with him. And then Carnegie told him, tell me what it is. And he told it back to him. And Carnegie said, you got it. Now I want to pay you to basically go and do this. So he started out the book essentially saying, I figured out this story with a story about Carnegie, who's one of the richest people in the history of the world. And you're wrapped up. Well, what's the story? What's the thing? And you have to keep reading to find out what it is, right? That's just not how most business books are written. Most business books start out with, so much more about like just an individual case study in each chapter. They just don't really get us going from start to finish as a part of a complete journey.
Yeah. So dense. And then, I was, talking about business books, but even talking about some of the work that you do with all of your videos. I mean, there's a hook at the beginning or a promise or a secret. And then it's hopefully, a good story reveals that at the end or at some point. Hopefully that's what it builds up to for the climax. And we see this with, everything. All right. Well, I think kind of keeping working down this list, this has been great, Chris. The kind of the difference of, bringing it back home to kind of video, maybe we can talk about how video is a different platform for storytelling than some of these other, for the, such as books or podcasts or even in-person trainings.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just would say that in terms of video, people tend to fall into they fall into doing it, what I would say, in an incorrect way. And that is they essentially describe something to people. They describe a product, they describe their company, they say, this is who we are, etc. And I think that, there's a total space for about us videos, and those should be like secondary on a page. But in terms of a video that really is going to compel someone, there should always just be one core story. And here's an example. One of our editors put together a really dynamic video about a product that one of our clients was launching. It was very, very well made, but it in no way touches your heart. It in no way makes you really emotionally engaged. And it was basically describing the product so people would get it. It was a lot of information. And I told him, we don't necessarily care. I honestly don't want in the information, but there was one story of people that were using the product. So we scratched the entire video, and instead we just told this one story of people using it. We told their story about their business and about how they use this product on one of their development days, how much it helped them grow and help learn about their individuals and help them grow closer as a team, and how much they saw about themselves. And we didn't say anything about like, here's what the product does, or here's how you use it. We just told one story. And the speaker whose wife was watching it, who, there was a whole room full of these products in their office. She said, like, we own this product, and after seeing this video, I want to buy it, right? That's the power of a great story. So it's like, scrap any idea that you have if you're going to describe your product or describe your company. Instead, come up with one core story, and one speaks louder than 10. Sometimes people are like, let's tell 3 stories in one video, like 3 different case studies. Like, no, just tell one case study of one person applying it, and everyone will see themselves in that story.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I like that kind of, quality versus quantity, and it gets overwhelming and confusing. Do you think that, why do you think people want to do 3 stories in one? Just because they feel like they're getting more bang for their buck, or more is better?
Yeah, we all just always think that more options is going to be help people. But the truth is if you know your best target market, the one that you're best at serving, you come up with one story that's reflective of that audience, and you're going to tell a much more effective video, or you're going to have a much more effective video than if you were to try to tell 3.
Yeah. That's awesome. And then, something that I've been kind of thinking about lately is a lot of people, or I'm still under the impression that video still seem, I mean, especially with everyone making this transition now to the internet and doing a lot more Zoom calls, it still feels like video is somewhat of a new thing for people. It feels like a newer platform. The written word has been around forever. Podcasts are becoming newer, but a lot of these other features, websites have been around, but videos has been around for a really long time, since, the 20s, 30s, but still feels new, mainly because I think people are doing it on a smaller scale on an individual basis. We wouldn't be able to do what we were doing, 20 years ago, because the equipment would have cost, well, maybe you could, I couldn't have, but the equipment would have cost too much. So I think a lot of people are now have access to the tools and are learning how to tell stories on a smaller scale. Do you feel that way in some regards?
Yeah, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
There's this quote by an anthropologist, and it says, "Watch out, here comes everyone." Right? But essentially, digitally native young people are all just naturally having the awareness that they all naturally have the awareness that they've got a video camera in their pocket, and they use it all the time. And YouTube has really helped with this, but I find that sometimes the most effective video is told on a cell phone. And for some of our clients, we actually have them. We get a nice move and a couple other things to make sure it's high quality, but we have them film their videos, even though we've got, tens of thousands of dollars of equipment. We have them film parts of the videos on their phone because it's so much more real and authentic, and people believe it more.
Yeah, isn't it interesting? How's the quote go? It's not the medium, it's the message, I think is kind of one of those quotes.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, if you're able to still, pull on the heartstrings and still produce good quality content, and for your folks, if they, if they're a good speaker, they're going to sound good on a $100,000 camera. They're going to sound good, but they're not going to be able to piece together that story by themselves. So that's where, someone like ourselves come in to be able to, craft that for them. Or like we were talking about earlier, is like you live in your shoes all day, but you don't see it until you're, someone else externally tells you, oh yeah, this is what your main story is. Even though.
Yeah. I mean, I was having a conversation with a client today who's absolutely going to be moving forward. And on the call, he was asking about a website. He said, "Your websites are amazing. I'd love to talk about a website." And I said, "Great. Talk to us about your business." And we had a conversation for probably 20 to 30 minutes on just his business model, where he's been in the past, how he's having to pivot now. And we told him, before we ever start anything related to your website, what we're going to need to understand is, your business model, what you're trying to achieve, and what your metrics and those kinds of things in your business are this year. And only when we understand your business model, the way you're going to grow, your distinction, your story, will we ever start a website. And he said, "I've had websites designed for me throughout my 40-year career. Like, nobody has asked me these questions about my website before. They've talked to me about messaging. They've talked to me about words. They've talked to me about colors. But if we as business owners are especially creatives, far more focused on helping clients build their business, right? Rather than just get a product out there or get a new website or make a video, we're going to find a much deeper story there. And people spend a lot more with you because they feel like you're helping them significantly grow their business, not deliver a service. And they always come in wanting a service.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, or like they always come in with an idea of what they think they're going to be getting. And then, being able to sit down with them and hone in on what are those differentiators, and not just putting like glossy, making things look really nice without having a purpose behind it. What is everything deriving from? What is that core value?
Right. So.
Well, Chris, I was curious, we've been talking about kind of public speakers. This is just one of the questions I had that was just out of my own curiosity, because I've worked with musicians. I haven't worked with a lot of actors or models or anything, but I would say, how would you say the speaker brand is slightly different?
Different. Just we can cut this out, but different than what?
Yeah. Well, I guess at the end of the day, like, they're still telling their story depending on who they are, but
well,
just in the terms of like promotion, or like, would you see that they're kind of a similar, like, one, it's a talent. So like if you're a speaker, like you have a talent that you're honing and you're bringing that to the masses, and but it is slightly different than an actor or a musician going up on stage, right?
It is still a brand. And I think that most people, both business owners, most creatives, everything, they just haven't taken enough time to really understand that their brand is an entity and that there's a story and a message and a voice and a sound. You know, I was just walking through the store the other day and I heard the Duracell sound, and I know it's for Duracell because it's got a sound. Like it's got like an actual sound to that message, to that brand. Speakers, what they often do is they feel like they have truth on their side because they're telling something great, or they say, I want to speak to a bunch of people, or I want to inspire the world. And I tell them that's great, but until you build a distinct brand, you're not going to be doing much of any of that. And so what is their brand? Well, their brand has like distinct characteristics to it. And a great example is an interview that was done with The Rock. And he said, here's the truth. I took only 3 components of my personality about authentic, like who I was, and I blew them up to build The Rock, right? I just made them big. People can't take 100 characteristics of you. It's too much. So just choose a few. And so I would say with speakers, and especially someone building something like you, Brian, with your podcast, and with other people who are building and build something, I think that people have to be really clear about the characteristics that they're going to convey. And they have to do them over and over until people just associate that characteristic with that person, right? So a tagline or a distinctive way that you say something, or to be known for one kind of idea, or be known to one group of people. So with our brand, we are known to only professional speakers. But I made that conscious decision because I was working with all these different business owners all the time, and I was constantly have to learn a new business model. And then that person wouldn't go out and then tell everyone about me. They would be like, thank you for the video, or help me with my message. And a lot of the projects would end up being one-off, or they would give a referral, but it'd be maybe to someone I didn't love. When I realized that speakers were changing the world, and these are some of those inspirational people on the planet, and they would pay me to learn their content and tell their story, it was just like I'm working with speakers. And then we decided our brand is going to be the most distinct production company in the speaker industry. And we set our vision for how that would be, and we built it around that idea. And so our brand isn't known all over. In fact, I live in Portland, and people ask me about the film and production community. And I don't know. I really don't have too many connections in it, because the truth is that if you ask anyone in the speaker industry, you know, or the National Speaker Association, specifically that association of speakers, our brand is really well known. And it's because we've been very clear about what that brand identity is, who it's going to be for, and what that story is we're telling. And as a result, we very rarely have to do that much marketing at all, because so much of our work is just constant word of mouth referrals.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's really powerful for people listening, and, you know, for myself included, that just like kind of segmenting down or becoming known with to a certain group of people is key. And I'd be curious, the people that ask you about the film industry, they're probably, they just kind of, have blinders on, looking at, oh, these are the tools. These are the similar tools I would see, in Hollywood production. So obviously everyone's like friends, but that, that's not the case. It's, kind of segmenting and figuring out who you like working with. And I would imagine you like working with public speakers because they're good talent on camera. You work with non-speakers, non-actors, and it's a lot more time, a lot more takes, and it's a lot more risk because you don't know if they're going to be prepared or not.
Yeah, but I will say this, Brian, there's only 2 ways to be distinct in the world. You either be known to one group of people, or you be known for one thing. And I don't think you have to be only known to one group of people. You can just be known for one type of service, right? There's a few things like that. Les Schwab is a tire company. Like, one of the things is they always run out to meet you.
Yeah.
That was just one small decision point that they made about their brand. But like, and they also will always fix your flats or anything. If you had your tires done there, you can always bring it back for free.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, there's these little components to it, but that creates such loyalty that people will like not go to any other tire shop than besides Les Schwab. Because why? Because the people come running, but it's still just a distinction about the brand. So they're basically known for something.
Mm-hmm.
So I always tell all of our clients, before we start the building process, we're going to really understand what's the one thing you're going to be known for, or who's the group you're best at serving. And either way is lucrative. the easier and more lucrative option, I will tell you though, is, and I've seen this over and over, is you're known to one group of people, you are in a totally different category in terms of how many referrals you'll be getting.
Wow. Yeah, kind of just being top of mind. I love the Les Schwab example there. Yeah, because I think that is really distinctive. Like they're yeah, or like they're known for quality service. So like, would you tell people maybe pick like a 3 or 4 things that you want to do, or actually a better question is, like, when you're working with a new client, would you tell them like you're going to ask a series of questions and draw out what it is that they're already doing, or do you have them make a list of things that they want to aspire to?
No, I just think it has to come from yourself. So like the CEO of Les Schwab, that was how he was oriented, was to like serve people in that way. So that's where that came from. Right. So, or the first, the owner of Les Schwab, the founder, I think it should come from the business owner.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the vision and values actually should come from them. Now I work with speakers all the time, and many of them consult and I've been in rooms, multi-billion-dollar companies, and the client I'm working with is the one speaking to them, and everyone's got a different opinion on this, but the values of the organization should come from its founder.
Very cool. Yeah.
And so I just think that it's already living inside of you. You have a purpose of what you're here to do. And a lot of times you've been given a certain set of skills that will help you do what you're here to do. And you've also been given an equal amount of opposition to those skills. So for example, if you tend to be really analytical, that's an amazing gift, but I've never seen it. Someone is not incredibly analytical and also so intuitive with people that they can read people's emotions and energies. You tend to get high emotional intelligence or high IQ. You don't get like both high IQ and EQ, like bam, like we need each other. We need people who are analytical, and we need people who are, high end on the emotional intelligence, read people, etc. And so you have the skills you're here to do, build the company that is aligned with your values, and make your distinctions just what you naturally do, who you are. So for example, when I started this company, I love to read and I love to learn, and I want to be around people making a difference in the world. So that's why we work with speakers. It's not because any of the videographers on my team are like, I love this. It's because of me as the founder.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of those traits trickling out. And I think that, kind of bring it back kind of the Myers-Briggs, the E and the I, you can only be one or the other. And I think it's great to like kind of surround yourself with people that can fill in those gaps. If you aren't, for myself in particular, I'm emotionally driven, but, luckily I'm engaged with someone that is a little bit more analytical and is able to differentiate like, hey, what direction should we take things? Whereas I'm, very ideas oriented or wanting to go and, chase shiny things sometimes. So
yeah, no, it's true. It's surrounding yourself with the opposites is vital.
Mm-hmm.
Our director of operations, and I set it up this way, she pretty much thinks the exact opposite as me. So I'm always like, I've got an idea. And she's like, that won't work. And I really do. I pay her to say that to me. Like, you haven't thought about the 7 things that will suck about that. And by the end of the conversation, I'm like, you're right, it won't work. But at least we have a realistic, otherwise I would have just jumped in and done it.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, you think of that's great that you kind of lined it up that way. And you think of some of the best relationships, or, some of the iconic ones like Steve Jobs and Wozniak, like those guys worked congruently together.
Yeah.
So, well, cool, Chris. Just a couple more questions here. I know your time is limited, but hold on. I guess my fiance wants to run. All right, run by Emily. She wants to run by in the background. She's has a new corner office here.
Nice.
While we're all working from home. Do you have any tips for someone first time getting on camera?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I would just say that you can train your videographer if they're not training you, which is to get you just comfortable in talking. So for example, if I'm going to have someone speak, I never dive into important questions. I turn the cameras on and I have them take a couple deep breaths, and then I tell them, I want this to feel so natural that for the first few questions, I'm not even going to talk to you about your business or your brand. Cool. And they're like, okay. And I'm like, what did you do yesterday? And then I ask them, about things that they love or their family or whatever, until they're just chatting with me. And then as we're chatting, I just slowly move them into what the questions that I actually want to know for their brand. And by then, and for example, what will happen is they'll be like, oh, my daughter, she does this and this. And then you're like, cool. So tell me about your brand. They're like, our business. And it's like, what happened? You were just a normal person, and then you just became this total whatever that just was. So I just tell them, a minute ago you were talking to me about your daughter and you were having just the most casual conversation with me. You just switched your whole tone. Let's go back to that. Yeah. So, tell me about your business. And then they're just more natural about it. So I would say that if a videographer isn't going to work with you in that way, if you're a business owner and you're trying to have a video made, tell them to be like, just get me talking, let me make this casual, because that's the way you want to come across, is just real and authentic.
Yeah. Kind of that free flowing consciousness. And I think back kind of like my journalism days, like, yeah, that's great advice. Is like, kind of, how can you make people feel comfortable? And then, yeah, you start with the hardball questions out of the gate, and you're going to have a hard day. And, it doesn't make the person being interviewed feel great, because they're like, oh man, I need to think of something profound for every word, and they're filtering themselves, and they just become this kind of monotone, robot throughout. Or they've prepared it ahead of time. Do you send over some of the questions to people beforehand, or just kind of,
no.
Yeah.
Most people analytically want them. I just tell them, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
They're like, no, I need to know. And I'm like, just don't worry about it.
Yeah. I mean, they live their business every day. They should kind of know it. And if anything, I think a lot of those interviews, you can kind of pull the best nuggets, kind of splice some different sentences together to make it sound like one sentence sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, great, Chris. Any last kind of closing ideas that you have? I think we've really honed in on story. I think I've been, tussling around with, like, how do you really get a business owner who has a million things going on? How do you get them to say, oh, story is important? They're like, what, Cinderella, Lion King, like, I don't care about that. Those are like, just those are little kid things, like a story, whatever. But I think in this podcast, we've really kind of driven home like the true impact that it can have. And I'm really appreciative for you hopping on here and talking about that. Any closing thoughts?
It really just is that the only time a brain is, all of systems are online and integrating, is when it's hearing a story. So if you know that, don't start anything, give a presentation, make a story or make a video, try to convey information in a meeting or do a sales conversation without telling a story. That's just the simplest way. The only way that people are going to make sense of what you shared with them, especially even on your website, is if you tell a story on it. And the most simple story is the way to go. For example, when we hire a new employee, the first thing that I always do is I spend the first hour of their onboarding day with them. And I first share my own story and why and how the company grew, or why it was founded and what we discussed. Then I spend the next 30 to 40 minutes just learning their story and what they're passionate about. And then I just try to connect the dots of, if that's what you want, and this is your story and this is what you want, how can you, while working here, learn more skills that will help you get what you want? And now they're connected to our company for themselves, not for me or not for us. Right? And I think that that's the best way to get ownership, is tell the origin story of your company. And it doesn't matter what kind of company it is. Maybe it doesn't feel sexy to you, but it's still great. Then always find out your team member story and then connect the two.
Yeah. And then I can only imagine that just probably leads to so much more connectivity, buy-in, and overall, efficiency of the organization, as Absolutely. Well as, just kind of getting to know more about somebody. And as soon as you know their story, then you can kind of connect with them on a whole nother level, right?
Absolutely.
So, well, thank you, Chris. This has been awesome. Very appreciative of your time. This is great. I think people have received a ton of great nuggets here, and I hope, I guess a little bit of homework for our viewers is go home and start working on, or if you're already at home, which you should be because of COVID, but start working on that brand story, right?
Absolutely. That's the key.
Cool. Well, thank you, Chris.
You're so welcome, man.
I want to say a big thanks for tuning into the Media Marketing Podcast. Please subscribe to get notifications for new episodes, which are coming out every Thursday morning, or at least we're striving for that. Feel free to visit our Facebook page where you can like and join the media marketing community. This is a good resource for collaborating, sharing ideas with other media creators, marketers, and those just looking to build their network. So until next time.